Hello everybody, welcome to the longest running league-oriented fantasy football podcast, The Cap. The only way they're going to catch up is if we slow down, and that's not going to happen. Through the first 5 weeks, we've talked about different trends that we've seen here in the LVFL. There's been more than the usual amount of games being decided on Monday night. We've also talked about justice, poetic justice, being handed out to some teams in the LVFL. We touched on how the games have been feast or famine and nowhere in between. You either get blown out or barely win, and vice versa. And also that in those feast or famine games, if you're going to lose, you're better off losing in a blowout as opposed to a heartbreaker. We've also seen how teams have broken trends during the season. If you take all of that, throw it in the oven, out will pop week 6 in the LVFL. It is absolutely astounding how all of those things that we've talked about over the last 5 weeks, all of them were relevant in week 6. You are not going to want to miss this episode. As usual, we'll also hand out cheese to the Offensive Player of the Week and the Offensive Snub of the Week. Enough is enough. Let's get into week 6 action. Here we go with Peter and I Love TDs facing off against Josue and his Raider Nation. Our quarterbacks had polar opposite starts. Big Ben, the Steelers doing it on the ground, getting a big lead, and then just nursing it all the way home. Big Ben, he only had 11.3 points, but Josue had Lamar Jackson and Sam Darnold. He was well on his way to 28.3 points. That Baltimore defense and special teams, they had about 22 points until late in the game. In the fourth quarter, they ended up with 9.6 points, and it was in that second half that Miles Sanders for Peter got the bulk of his 118 yards for 11.2 points. I Love TDs and Raider Nation, they would spar back and forth. Josue with Calvin Ridley, he racks in another touchdown, 6 receptions, 61 yards, and 12.9 points. But Peter countered with A.J. Brown, 3 touchdowns in the last 2 games, 5 receptions, 56 yards, and 17.6 points. Oh, but the stunner of them all, I Love TDs, picks up the Miami defense and special teams. They shut out the New York Jets. They had 1 interception, sacks galore, and Josue getting a little taste of his own medicine. The Miami defense and special teams puts in 22.1 points. In the Sunday night game, Peter had Robert Woods. Josue had Cooper Kupp and Darrell Henderson Jr. No, and Peter caught a couple of breaks in this one. This touchdown by Darrell Henderson, it gets called back on a penalty. They end up scoring a touchdown, but it goes to Robert Woods. 4 receptions, 29 yards, and a touchdown for 10 points even. Later on in the game, this pass to Cooper Kupp, 9 times out of 10 he comes down with that. That pretty much kept Cooper Kupp off the scoreboard. And guess what, folks? We would go to Monday night. For Josue, he had Travis Kelce. This guy is a fantasy beast. 5 receptions, 65 yards, 2 touchdowns for 16.5 points. And he also had Harrison Butker. He chipped 8 points. Kelce and Butker give Josue a 16-point lead going into the late Monday night game. Peter with Amari Cooper and Greg Zuerlein, Legatron, down 16 points, and it was deja vu all over again. At halftime, Amari Cooper was still being shut out. Greg Zuerlein, he had a field goal, but pretty much undid that when they went for a 54-yard field goal, and it wasn't even close, so he would lose points for missing that field goal. It wasn't until late third quarter and in the fourth quarter where Amari Cooper would chip away at that lead. The lead would be cut down to 6 points with about 4 minutes remaining in the game. It was grueling watching all these touchdowns apparently set up for Ezekiel Elliott. Touchdowns set up for Michael Gallup. He got a couple of shots taken to him on that final drive. It would come up empty and they would finally target Amari Cooper, and it's no good. That was Cooper's shot to haul in the winning touchdown, but this thing would get strung out till 3rd and goal from the 1. Big Red delivers to Amari Cooper, and the Serpa household came apart at the seams with that score. Oh, come on, to Coop. Coop! 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 Oh, Coop! Oh, Coop! Then Zerline with the all-important but never a gimme extra point puts it through. Peter comes back to win it on Monday night. Guys, the Limpieza got that win for me last time, and the Caracoles told me to pick up the Miami defense and play them against the Jets, and that was the Miami defense and special teams. That was the difference in this one. And some more poetic justice for Josue. He took down the undefeated Rolling with My Homies last week on the back of a 20-plus point performance from his Baltimore Ravens defense. And wouldn't you know it, of all the different ways to get off that Monday night schneid, Peter and I Love TDs do it against Josue on the backs of the Miami Dolphins defense and special teams. This one was an instant classic, at least in the Serpa household it was. But Peter finally gets that Monday night monkey off of his back. Josue drops a heartbreaker. We talked about that. It would have been better being blown out. And Peter with I Love TDs gets his 2nd win in a row. And thus the running of the table begins. We go to the Guzman Bowl. Juan Guzman and his Orange Crush up against Pedro Guzman. Da Chief! Juan, he did all his damage early because Pedro, he had 5 starters that would be playing on Monday night. Juan, Deshaun Watson looks to be back in form ever since they let go of Bill O'Brien, which was a good thing. That guy didn't win his first challenge until week 16 last year, so that's all you got to know about him. But in that track meet that was the Houston-Tennessee game, Deshaun Watson goes for 335 yards, 4 touchdowns, and 36.6 points. James Conner, he had 100-plus rushing yards and a touchdown, got to 16.2 points. Pedro on Sunday, you had Aaron Jones. That San Francisco D just bottled him up. He got you 10.1 points, his worst outing this year. You did have Will Fuller the fifth, 18.3 points for 6 receptions, 123 yards, and a touchdown. Will Fuller the fifth has a touchdown in his 4th straight game. Before the season started, Will Fuller was ranked as the 35th top-ranked wide receiver in the NFL. As of this week, he was ranked number 7 in the NFL, and maybe 1 or 2 spots higher if you ask me. But we go to Monday, Edwards-Helaire. He got you 16.9 points on 161 rushing yards. To the late Monday night game, Pedro, he had Kyler Murray, the Arizona defense and special teams, and the Arizona Cardinals place kicker, Zane Gonzalez. And Juan, he had running back from Arizona, Kenyon Drake. And just as you would expect, Kyler Murray would draw first blood with this touchdown. But that was quickly offset by this touchdown from Kenyon Drake from inside the 1. So Pedro pretty much right back where he started in this game. Then Kyler Murray would pour it on 80 yards to Christian Kirk on this touchdown strike. Murray would add another touchdown a little bit later in the game. All in between the Arizona defense and special teams. They'd come up with 2 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries. They were doing everything they could to chip away at that lead. Meanwhile, Kenyon Drake, semi-quiet. And with each Arizona touchdown, that was another point for Zane Gonzalez, the Arizona kicker Pedro was rostering. And we get to the 4th quarter, 2 minutes, 50 seconds left. Pedro is down by 0.4 of a point. Any score by Dallas ends it for Pedro because that would take down his Arizona defensive special teams score. but it was all a moot point at 2:49 left in the fourth quarter. The Arizona defense and special teams gives up this touchdown to Amari Cooper. And Pedro sees his 0.4 of a point deficit increase to 4 points. But with Dallas scoring that touchdown, they have to kick it off to Arizona, giving Kyler Murray and company some more chances to take the lead. But it was all over on this handoff to Kenyon Drake. He goes 69 yards for the touchdown, and that did it for Juan Guzman and his Orange Crush. Juan survives the Monday Night Monster, ends up winning by 17, but we all know that score is closer to a 0.4 of a point victory. But a victory is a victory is a victory, no matter if it's by 0.4 of a point or 17. Juan Guzman and his Orange Crush, they win the Guzman Bowl over Pedro Da Chief. So Juan, he rattles off his third straight victory. He goes to 3-3, and Pedro, with the loss, also drops to 3-3. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was RJ rolling with my homies, going up against Joey and his Viking Nation. Joey in the early games got about as good of a start that you could hope for. Ryan Tannehill, he had 364 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 interception for 34.9 points. The quarterback controversy down there in Viking Nation looks to be resolved. The GOAT relegated to backup status. But Ryan Tannehill, since leaving Miami, has blown up. We saw him do it last season. He continues to do it this season. In that Tennessee offense, he looks legit. The Pittsburgh Steelers defense and special team does it for you again, Joey. 19.3 points. They had 2 interceptions, 1 touchdown, and only allowed 7 points, in stark contrast to that 49er defensive and special teams unit. Oh, what a fall from grace this year. It's that Super Bowl hangover. RJ, they netted you 6.8 points. You also had George Kittle. He has come back with a vengeance. 7 receptions, 109 yards, a touchdown, 16.9 points. Joey lost Dalvin Cook last week, so what'd he do? Replace him with a former Viking, AP Adrian Peterson. He had a touchdown, 40 yards, 11.8 points. He is still alive and still producing. And Ronald Jones II, he did a number on that Green Bay defense. 113 yards, 2 touchdowns, 24.1 points. That was in the afternoon game, which gave you a sizable cushion heading into Monday, but it was by no means over. RJ, he had Patrick Mahomes rolling with my homies, and Ezekiel Elliott, Zeke the Freak. Mahomes had a modest game by Mahomes standards anyway. He had 22.3 points on 2 touchdowns and 225 points. You would have liked to have seen those numbers more like Ryan Tannehill, but in the rain down there in Buffalo, 22.3 points is quite the accomplishment. And Zeke, with Dak not there, everybody's just gonna stack the box, stop Ezekiel, and have Big Red try to beat him. No way you were gonna make up all those points with Ezekiel Elliott. Joey getting to the best start in his career. He goes to 5-1, and RJ suffers his 2nd loss in a row, but he's still in way good shape. He drops to 4-2. Moving along to the next game on the tally, it was Jordan with the Rona season. He's got a case of the Rona, up against Nick and his Killer Bees. Jordan, you couldn't have picked a better week for Mike Evans to only receive 1 reception. The Kansas City defense holds Josh Allen to his lowest point total so far this season. Jordan also got Julio the Machine Jones. He went off. He had 8 receptions, 137 yards, 2 touchdowns for 25.7 fantasy points. But the stud of the game, Derrick Henry. I don't know how many career 200-plus yards rushing games Derrick Henry has, but he added another one this last weekend. 212 yards, 2 touchdowns for 43.4 points. Derrick Henry alone outscored Nick and your Killer Bees. Nick, you had Russell Wilson on a bye this week, and also the newly acquired toy, Josh Jacobs. They were on a bye week, both of them. But still, bro, Matt Stafford infection. He stepped in for Russell Wilson, but those are some huge shoes to fill. He managed only 12 points. Jake Elliott, the kicker, he missed a field goal. He finished with -1 points. That production, air quotes, the lowest in league history. But you're a resilient guy, and pretty soon you're going to have Russell Wilson back, Josh Jacobs back, and soon you'll be getting Run CMC, the Great White Hype, Christian McCaffrey. That's going to be quite the backfield you have there. Russell Wilson at QB, and then McCaffrey and Josh Jacobs behind him. This season, far, far from over for you. So with the victory, Jordan, Rona season, he improves to 4-2. Nick and Killer Bees, you drop to 2-4. Moving along to the final game on the tally, it was Northern Kid Jared Kobasic facing off against Hurricane Laura. After the fiasco of last week when Jared left Chase Claypool on the bench and had 35 points, he put him in his starting lineup this week, and he was his top performer. Chase Claypool, 14.1 points on 4 receptions, 74 yards, and a rushing touchdown. But that wasn't his highest point getter. That went to the Tampa Bay defense. They gave him 20 points even, but it was a little bittersweet because he had Aaron Rodgers starting. And as you saw, that Tampa Bay defense dismantled Aaron Rodgers. He only had 2.2 points in the game. And who was Jared starting at tight end? Oh, Jason Sternberger. He equals his last performance. 0 receptions, 0 yards for 0.0 points. And Hurricane Laura, her lone bright spot was Mighty Joe Mixon, 12.9 points. He had 54 yards and a touchdown. And Laura, this is a decimation of a lineup. I can't remember when the last time I saw something like this was. You lost Dak Prescott last week. You haven't had Michael Thomas, Le'Veon Bell, and yesterday, Zach Ertz. He's out for 4 to 6 weeks. You couldn't lose an Austin Hooper to injury or a Julian Edelman. You had to have their big guns, Michael Thomas, Zach Ertz, Dak Prescott, and Le'Veon Bell. We know it's your first season playing fantasy football, Laura. Hopefully this doesn't leave a bad taste in your mouth. Hopefully you'll be with us next season. Jared, it's not often you score 73.3 points and come out the victor, but that's what happened this week against Hurricane Laura. Jared, he goes to 2-4, and Hurricane Laura drops to 1-5. Close the shop on an unbelievable Week 6 in the LVFL. Pedro and Juan, Peter and Josue, it was a stress test in how those games came out. Congratulations to Juan for his 3rd win in a row. Congratulations are also in order for Peter. He finally got that Monday Night Monkey off of his back. Our deepest condolences to Nick and Laura, especially Laura. The type of season you've had, I swear, is not typical in fantasy football. At least not typical for the same person year after year. We've all had that type of season that you're going through now. It works out endurance, Laura. It works out endurance. Let's put Week 6 behind us and hand out some cheese. The Offensive Player of the Week goes to Derrick Henry. 212 yards, 2 touchdowns, 43.4 points. Derrick Henry becomes the first player in NFL history with 200-yard rushing games in 3 consecutive seasons. No one has done what Derrick Henry has done 3 straight seasons having a 200-yard rushing game. Congratulations to the young man. The record for 200-yard rushing games in an NFL career is 6. Derrick Henry is already halfway there in his young career. The offensive snub of the week goes to Josue, Raider Nation. He had Justin Jefferson on the bench, 9 receptions, 166 yards, 2 touchdowns, 30.6 points on the bench. No ifs, woulda, coulda, or shouldas in fantasy football. Justin Jefferson, 30.6 points, our offensive snub of the week. We are halfway through the season. Teams are beginning to jockey for position. Hopefully, COVID will not wreak havoc as we go down the last half of the season and closing in on the final weeks. I will try to keep as much up-to-date information that the NFL puts up on our league chat, but please guys, try to keep an eye on it for yourself. This is The KAEP, the flagship podcast of the LVFL. And to everybody out there in the LVFL universe, we say, Go! Go!